Well, Paul Champ is the lawyer representing Centretown residents and businesses at the public inquiry. Mr. Champ, thank you for joining us again.
Nice to speak with you, Michael.
Now, from the outset, you said that your purpose was to get the stories out there, to ensure what people in Centretown endured was actually stated for the public record. Why is that important for you?
Well, it's because there's so much misinformation and misperception out there about how serious the impact was on the people in downtown Ottawa in businesses. You know, we heard even more evidence today about how paramedics were having difficulty getting downtown, home care services, bridges were closed. It was just a terrible situation for the people in Ottawa, and they were trapped in their own homes.
It's interesting you say that, though, because I did speak to one lawyer for the protesters who said that if someone chooses to live in downtown Ottawa near Parliament Hill, protest is something they need to expect. What do you say to that?
Well, he's completely right on that. In terms of where you live, if you are living, close to the Parliament buildings, you do need to expect some interference and inconvenience at times of your life, and Ottawa has that all the time. You know, the people who live in downtown Ottawa, I think, are largely, very proud that they live in the nation's capital and host, different protests and demonstrations and the exercise of fundamental freedoms. But there is a limit where those rights and freedoms become abused, and it's not reasonable to have 100 to 120 decibel truck horns going 24 hours a day. It's not reasonable to have people shoot fireworks off your window. It's not reasonable to have all buses and paratranspo and all other services shut down for weeks at a time. It's completely and totally unreasonable and intolerable. And I'm surprised that the protesters, now that they've got a bit of hindsight, aren't realizing the real harm that they had on Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Well, to build on that, we did, just before we came to you, hear from two of your clients, one of whom was Victoria de la Ronde. Mm-hmm. And from her testimony, talk to us about what made the protest so hard for her.
Well, as you have heard, Ms. de la Ronde is visually impaired, so she experienced another level of helplessness and interference with her daily life. Trying to step out the door was very difficult in so many ways. With the loud horns, she often uses sound to direct herself. She couldn't do that because the city couldn't do snow removal. The streets were slippery. There's the other issues of harassment, of people jumping in front of her while she was walking and asking her about her mask and so forth. But those were the issues, and as well the diesel fumes. Pardon me. She was particularly vulnerable to the diesel fumes, and where she was located, she was at a particularly high concentration area of the trucks, and the diesel fumes were so significant in her home that when the protest was over, she had to get all her drapes and bedding all cleaned and carpets because they smelled of diesel. Like it was unbelievable what people in Ottawa had to endure.
Mm-hmm. And beyond the carpets too, she also talked about having ongoing physical issues because of the protest. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, indeed. Ms. de la Ronde, as I said, she's visually impaired, but now her hearing is also has experienced harm. She has tinnitus, like a low ringing in her ears, and she's also experienced hearing loss. She's got appointments with doctors to see if that's ever corrected, but she's concerned at her age that this hearing loss is going to be permanent. It's just terrible. It was a total assault on the people of Ottawa, and she's not alone. I can tell you I've spoken with many other people in downtown Ottawa who've experienced tinnitus and hearing loss, and I think in the months to come, we're going to hear a lot more about how many people did experience those physical harms.
Mm-hmm. And physical harms, the lasting impact of the protest. But I also want to talk about Zexi Lee because, as people may remember her name, she is the Centretown residents who filed a court action against the protesters, in particular the constant blaring of the horns, and she was harassed as a result. Does that continue to this day, Mr. Champ?
Well, the intense harassment, online harassment and otherwise, subsided after the protests or demonstrations was over. But it was difficult even for her testifying. There was a number of people yelling at her when she came out of the building after her testifying here at the Library and Archives Canada, calling her a commie or asking her was she a Chinese government agent. It was just outrageous. And even down the block, it was just good citizens of Ottawa who intervened and blocked and stopped some of the people who were harassing her walking down the street. We just have a breakdown completely in civility and basic respect for each other in Canada. And I'm kind of speechless, really.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, the Commission will be issuing a final report, and ultimately it will be about the use of the Emergencies Act. But I'm wondering what you hope is actually included in that report as well, because it seems that you are less occupied about the invocation of the Act. I don't know if that's fair to say. But if it's not about the invocation, what is it that you're looking for out of this final report?
Well, I think the evidence that we're hearing, as I see it, is that if the invocation of the Emergency Act was necessary, it was, because of 3 weeks of, confusion and lack of coordination between different levels of government. We're hearing very clearly from the city manager of Ottawa that they absolutely needed additional resources, that the Ottawa Police Service, once the initial tactical mistake was made of all these commercial trucks being able to come to downtown Ottawa, they were simply unable to remove them, and they needed additional resources. Well, then why did it take so long for the province of Ontario and the federal government to provide those additional resources? So I think that in the end, in this Commission of Inquiry, we're looking for some recommendations in future that recognize that Ottawa is the site of protest. It is the site of demonstrations. We are going to see that in future, and it's great that we are. I mean, this is, again, Ottawa is the place where people should come to be heard and to have their voices heard by Parliament and to exercise their freedoms of association and freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. But we definitely need, I think, some recommendations where there's different structures or other things set up where the city and the provincial government and ultimately the federal government can work together more closely in events like this in future.
Paul Champ, thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you, Michael.